Hello, Mr. Stiff. I am here today to talk about pre-colonial African societies, to talk about what were African societies like during the Middle Ages and age of global convergence. In my opinion, I feel like the purpose of this assignment was really important. It was trying to show a less Eurocentric view on Africa and on African societies. I feel like a lot of people, including myself, before learning about this unit, had a very Eurocentric view of it because that's what we're taught a lot of times in school and stuff. So I'm going to get right into it. The first phrase I chose to describe African societies was that they were vital to a lot of different trading systems and trade in general. So the Indian Ocean trade routes, some cities that traded were Kilwa, Zanzibar, Gondar, and Lunda. All of these places really traded a lot of different goods and participated in this global trade network. Some of the goods they produced and were able to trade were exotic animal skins, ivory, gold, salt, and bronze. Different things for different purposes. I felt like that was really important to mention how many things they contributed to a lot of different people in different societies. And another big point with trade is they participated in the slave trade. Before I learned about this, I really thought that it was Europeans coming in and taking over everything, which in some parts, yes, it was, but some of these leaders participated in it and decided to trade some of their people or people they captured into the slave trade. So I would say people like King of Congo and Nzinga traded slaves, and they traded them for the New World because Portuguese was developing a lot of places in Brazil and around the Caribbean and in the Americas. Next up is intellectually advanced with diverse and rich cultures. So I feel like that was a big thing to chunk together, but I feel like it makes sense once I explain it. So some of the things that really helped them become intellectually advanced was their very big part in trade and their very intelligent leaders. I feel like one of the leaders I really remembered a lot about is Nana Asuma. She put value on poetry as a poet in her society. And although she didn't rule, she was a queen, I believe, which didn't have much political stance. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But she put a lot of value on literacy, which is not always seen as an African thing because they didn't write down their history, which many people discard them as an advanced society, which we'll get into in a minute. But yeah, vast religious diversity in Ethiopia. There was Christianity and sometimes Catholicism, depending on what you talked about in history. In some West African countries, they traded with Islamic countries, and there was a lot of Muslim Africans in these societies and Muslim kings. Vodun, I'm not believing if I'm pronouncing that right, but that was a religion as well that slaves brought into the New World, and that's how voodoo and stuff came down to the South in America, actually. Something that else was very intellectual, that they had a really amazing architecture and beautiful buildings. They were very smart in the way they built things, and a lot of things are still here today. Some famous examples are in Gondar, there's castles. Zanzibar had these amazing walls and barricades, I would say. And lastly, history. Griots were verbal history keepers, and they kept history for these people for thousands of years before Europeans decided to set the standard that writing down your history was important. So they were very diverse. And lastly, diplomatic. They had multiple societies and different people had vast involvements with Europe and Portugal in particular, I would say. And Nzinga made many treaties and was able to end a war temporarily with them by having conversation and being diplomatic and trying to make peace. Censor had a very big interest in Catholicism, and I remember watching a video, and it put Ethiopia and put an African country on a list of famous world leaders in Europe, which is a big deal. And silent trade with Islam caused many cultural exchange. Languages were formed. The language Swahili was a mix of African Bantu and Arabic, and I believe some French. I totally may be wrong, but the first two I'm 100% sure on. And religion and society, the Islamification of Africa was a big thing we learned about in some places, and especially West Africa, I would believe. And it just created a big sense of diplomacy in society because it put emphasis on how important interacting with other people were. And I would say, finally, the Indian Ocean trade created a market set by merchants and created a lot of exchange between Africa and the world. Many different countries and places in Africa interacted with a lot of different countries, such as China, a lot of European nations, Arabia, places in Southwest Asia, and Saudi Arabia. Thank you. I know I went a minute over, but it was important. Thank you. Bye.